could be over far more quickly if Hamas let the hostages go, couldn't it?
The issue is that what happened since the beginning of March is starvation of the Gazan people again. Your previous correspondent talked about that. But there is starvation of a civilian population in Gaza now since the 1st of March. The situation with the hostages is deplorable. They should be released. There was a plan for phase 2 when more hostages would come out. But as you rightly implied, Tom, just now, Israel's walked away from that phase 2 and phase 3 and is now saying, we will negotiate only while firing. That is not a way forward. And I do not believe that Netanyahu can achieve his two aims. One is the elimination of Hamas. I don't think he can achieve that. But secondly, this is no way to secure the release of 24 remaining hostages who deserve to be released.
Come back to the point that was made by Mr. Rubenstein about the common sense claim that is backed up in the wording of the law that he cites, that says that if the consignment is directed from its destination and goes into the hands of, in effect, Israel's enemy here, they have the right to pause that consignment getting in. It's true, isn't it, that Hamas have taken aid trucks for themselves?
The situation with the Geneva Convention is that Israel quotes it when it suits them and not when it doesn't. For instance, the Geneva Convention says, do not move your population into occupied territory. Gaza and the West Bank are occupied territory, and the settlements in the West Bank are contrary to the Geneva Convention. Coming back to your point, I'm not an apologist for Hamas. Hamas has said that in the context of the Arab plan, which is the future in terms of negotiation, they would not be part of the future government of Gaza. That's an important step. What we need to do as Britain is face some questions, if I may, Tom. The British government, you cited earlier, is in a bit of a muddle about whether starvation is a war crime or not. It is clearly, unequivocally a war crime, and Israel has reverted to it. Did it in October, it's doing it again now.
Although the Israelis say there is more than enough food in Gaza, it's being siphoned off by Hamas. The amount of aid has gone in would offer more sustenance to people than could be taken out in months.
The information that I'm hearing from UNRWA and others is that starvation is back in Gaza. But I said earlier about Netanyahu's declared aims, they're contradictory. How can you expect to secure the outcome you want if you want the hostages out, which I want, you want, and any sensible person wants, while waging war on the people who hold them? But back to questions for our government. If starvation is being done, is being committed by Israel now, is our government complicit in not speaking out and acting against that starvation act? Should we be selling F-35 spare parts to Israel? Do we agree with the International Court of Justice that the occupation is unlawful and should stop as soon as possible? And are we doing all we can to make that happen?
I mean, that's a question.
Not yet.
Yeah, that question about settlements and their legality has been one that hasn't been answered by successive British governments for a very, very long time. I think David Cameron, actually, as Prime Minister, called out Israel on that in a way that no other British Prime Minister had or has since, really. Do you think is there any way in which a ceasefire deal can now be agreed with the pressure that's clearly being applied on Hamas, either internally in Gaza or externally by Israel, to give up the hostages far more quickly?
I think that the way forward is to rely heavily on two things. One, Europe, because I'm not sure we can rely on the United States at the moment in this issue. And secondly, on the Arab neighbours of Israel, who, particularly Qatar and Egypt, who have worked so hard on mediation in the past. They need to be given space and time to renew the discussion of phase 2 and phase 3. That isn't being given at the moment. Israel seems to have turned its back on negotiation. We need to ensure that Israel returns to the negotiating table. And if I can add one point from our British ambassador to Israel, who's from Northern Ireland, has experience of the troubles there. He said on Tuesday, at some point the fighting has to stop and the diplomacy begin. And that point is now.
Sir Vincent, thanks for coming on. Sir Vincent Fean, former Consul-General to Jerusalem, trustee of the British Palestine Project.